Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here again another year. And thank you so much for joining us this afternoon to explain a little bit these ESG words that make the world better. So I'm going to explain a little bit what's the Telefónica mission. So we always said, Payete, our president always said, to make our world more human, connecting people's life. So in that line, I would like you all to explain a little bit what are you working on from your projects. In Guaira, we are the corporate venture capital of Telefónica. We invest in many sectors, but the ESG sectors is one of the most important that we are now focusing to nurture our portfolio. So I would like to explain, first of all, Fran, a little bit what is climate trade, what you're working on.
Thank you, Carlos. Thank you for having us here. Well, climate trade today is like one of the leading decarbonization platforms worldwide. We help corporations to find which is their carbon footprint and find the biggest source of projects worldwide in order to decarbonize, to compensate the carbon footprint, and find other climate assets. At the same time, that suite of software that we have allows, through our API, to integrate B2B2B and B2B2C through a white label or API integration, very plug-and-play API, to integrate calculation services and offsetting in any product and service that you want to sell, that you may imagine. Transportation, flights, cargo shipping, selling technological products like 2.com from Telefónica, or wherever, Santander, when you pay with your credit card, you can calculate and offset your carbon footprint as a user. So that's what we do.
Thank you. And climate trade is more in that environmental world from ESG. But Javier, I would like you to explain you a little bit more about Becas, because Becas is more social. You're more in the EdTech, and we know that Bosco is now pitching also in the final of South Summit. So first of all, congratulations.
Yeah.
So explain us a little bit more about Becas.
Yeah. We are a platform. Our aim is to connect the students who want to continue education, in tertiary education, that do not have the resources to access to those educations. So we look for high talent, low income students, and we also look for courses that are directly related to high employability rates. So we try to match those students with those courses. So anybody who wants to upskill or upskill, I say anybody, but it's not anybody. Our requirement is that there should be that the student has to be a high talent student with low income. No? So we offer a financing instrument, which is the so-called ISA, income sharing agreements. We finance the tuition of the course, so the student the student doesn't make any payment up front. The student only start paying back the ISA once he lands a job. So the installments are related to the salary they are earning, so the interests are completely aligned.
Great. And last but not least, David, to explain us a little bit more about Borneo, because in that governance, in that ESG governance, we led by example, taking responsibility of our actions to build trust.
Sure. Thanks so much, Carlos and Guaira, for hosting us. Why we are fitting at governance at G is actually very interesting, and let me ask you guys something so you will understand why and what we do. How many of you, please, hands up, are treating data or collecting data, personal data, from your network of business? Yeah. Okay. So if I'm asking you, what kind of data are you collecting? You might say, well, personal data, okay, fine. What your departments are collecting, you as a, say, CEO, or as a compliance, or as a legal department, if I'm asking you what kind of data your marketing team, your payrolls, your HR team, your sales team is collecting, probably you'll say, I have no idea. What if I'm saying that this is sensitive data, and this data has to be, in certain regulations, treated with security measures, but more important, it has to be compliance, no? So that's a big problem, the visibility and discovery. Most of those companies don't know how to implement security measures, basically because they don't know what kind of data are they treating. Is this data sensitive? Who has access to this data? right? And this data, it's no more than your clients, your employees, your vendors, right? So we're talking about a core asset, and that's a big question, right? So governance for us, it's, okay, let's start with this visibility, discovery, let's classify, let's catalog, let's give you, as a company, as a compliance, as a CEO, the information, and once you have the information, you can take some sort of, let's say, decisions. No? What decisions? First of all, on analyzing risks. So for us, it's so important, and we analyze risks based on data, based on regulations, based on business-oriented objectives. And the last and the most important, I would say, let's say, stage is remediation. So we are helping companies just with the assessments. Do we have to encrypt data? Do we have to create policies? Do we have to retain data? Do we have to remove certain data that we shouldn't have as a company? No? So this is a bit the governance on the transparency, on the trust, and what as Borneo we do always with artificial intelligence connectors, so we apply a lot of technology worldwide.
It sounds great, the three of us, because they're working on very different ways, but always to reach that impact. So let's go back to climate trade, Fran. So how does climate trade use the blockchain technology to ensure the transparency and traceability of the carbon offset transactions, more or less, to deep dive more in climate trade?
If you think about the problem that we have with climate change, one of the biggest problems is decarbonization, right? But how do we decarbonize? How do we reduce emissions? We have to find out which are the, let's say, the destinations of the funds in order to generate a positive impact, in order to generate that impact that allows to reduce emissions, right? Before, this was a market managed by brokers totally. 90% still of the market is OTC. So most of the cases, before we introduced blockchain, there were double counting. Imagine that I sell to a company today credits, carbon credits, but at the same day I go to other company and I sell this, my partner, before you know, they sell to other company without not canceling that in any registry. There is double counting. They are selling several times same thing, right? We need accounting. Blockchain allows transparency and traceability of funds, and at the same time, that transparency, because at the end, when you put something in blockchain, depends on the oracle that put it there. And the oracle is the person. Imagine if I bring a real data and I put it in blockchain, it's immutable, right? I don't put it in just one server that I can delete. No, I put it in multiple, in this case, there are nodes, right? But blockchain is transparency and traceability is a great use case for that. So what we do is we provide transparency of where your money is going, the impact that is generating, and that ton of CO2 reduced is accounted. And then we upload it there. That's why blockchain is so important for climate.
And talking about that transparency that you were talking about with climate trade, David, what is the motivation for companies today to take seriously that sense of ethics and more that responsible of the data they are using?
That is actually a really good question, and it's changing, right? And now everybody talks about ChatGPT, artificial intelligence. I'll try to just say 100 times ChatGPT, so I'm not just bothering you with that. But that's a real, right? So main problem with ChatGPT in Europe is privacy, right? You probably have heard about Facebook last month, $1.2 billion fine. The highest record with fines because of the international transfers. What's the problem? When we started actually with all the compliance, privacy, and data security, for most of the companies, it was a must-have because regulations, because compliance, because someone tells that GDPR, CCPA, every single country have their own. Right now, it's a business decision. Just because you, as a company that you are scaling, you are willing to sell and work with bigger, let's say, partners, bigger clients, or just to demonstrate trust with your own clients, right? With your own users. The only way is with the right policies, with the right transparency, with the right ethics on processing personal data, right? So that's why that changed a lot. Companies are not just doing it just because the fines, because they're quite high, up until 3% of the incomes. I think that what is changing, and I cannot say the name, but a very good human resources SaaS from Spain, right, is right now going with us, and we're going to actually do some sort of events, just because they understood that a differentiator, a competitive advantage will be positioning themselves in that privacy, right, ethical transparency on the data they treat. Imagine human resources, payrolls, like everything related to health, status. So there is a lot of data. There is a lot of, even we were talking about Cabify, and a guy said, no, Cabify is not treating personal data or sensitive data. That's wrong. Cabify knows exactly what you do, where you're going every day. Are you with someone else? Who are you with? Right? Because sometimes if the other person has the account, the geolocation is there. Right? It's insane. So what I'm saying is that we, as users, we have no idea about what Alexa or Google is collecting at the time that we are talking. But it's getting context. And that's why then the adverts tells you, hey, do you want to buy a car? Oh, I was talking about cars before at home. And Alexa or Google Home just took it, right? All of that is data. And that's why privacy or ChatGPT is struggling, because it's collecting data everywhere with no consent, right? So for me, what is really interesting, exciting, and as well I would say concerning, is that because data is everywhere, how do we regulate it? How do we create ethical uses? How do we do it in a way, in an environment that is not limiting such an amazing technology as artificial intelligence? No? And I have no response for that.
And talking about the education, Javi, you were talking about that Becas works in that ESAS part. I would like to deep dive in that. So how you, or what's the motor to say who you give that money to, just to study? And then how you calculate that? So it's not only to check who is the best person to be the benefit of the ISA, instead of how you calculate the impact of that ISA in the education.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, we do really analyze two things. First, the student, and the second one is the courses. The education course. So the ISA is not for every student and it's not for every course. So going deeper into what we analyze in what we assess in the student part. Okay, first requirement is that the student has to be motivated. Okay, education is the most powerful equalizer we have today, and these courses are really a life changer for our students. So students. We require the students see the courses as a life changer to upskill or to reskill to get access to a better job. So that's the first requirement. The second requirement is that the student has to meet the skills necessary to finish the course and to land the job. So we conduct an assessment. We look for hard skills, soft skills, and other type of issues, and we say, okay, this student is motivated, this student is capable of finishing the course. And the third thing, the last thing we analyze here is the financial scoring. It's not we don't conduct the same financial scoring that as a bank does because our students have no money. So we try to analyze the financial behavior of our students in order to look for default patterns that could advance that the student is not going to pay back the ISA at the end of when he lands a job. And the courses that we try to finance are those courses really linked to employability. Now we are focused on technology education because there is a high employability rate. So the last requirement, but is the most important one, is that we look for low-income students. Okay, how we assess if a student has low income or a high income? Where we ask for the student, we collect all the tax data and employability data, the track record, in order to assess if the student is suitable for this type of finance.
And here there are two things, because it's not only that numbers, that data, it's also the skills, no? How you ensure that the skills also match. I think you are working also with some psychologists or some tests to evaluate it, isn't it?
Yeah. We built our hypothesis of what the skills are demanded by companies. And we built some hypotheses, and now we are checking, because we have the first students who are already in the market, and we are seeing who is being employed faster and who is being employed not as faster as the good ones. No? So, but one of the key things is that we don't require the student to have any education background. So here it's very difficult for a student who has not a university degree to get access to any finance instrument. Because if you want to ask to go to a bootcamp, the bank is going to say, okay, what is your income? 0. Okay, what is your educational background? I have no educational background. We don't look for, we don't really give to these points big importance. We try to analyze the ability of the student to finance the course, and we try to analyze the motivation of the students, because if the student is motivated and has the necessary skills, and his skills is not the same as educational background, that student is going to be able to finish the course, and once the course is finished, to land a job that gives him a better life.
And in that way of trying to find on to score, Fran, how do you score that project? How do you select the projects to work with from Climate Trade?
I'm going to put you in context the type of projects we are talking about now. So imagine in the voluntary market, carbon markets, you have like reforestation projects. We have conservation projects, biomass, biogas. We can have seaweed projects in the sea and mangroves, all types of projects. No? So basically, it's always about which is the project that more, the CO2 that captures that project, where it's located. There are intangibles, right? So you need to measure the intangibles of every project, and you need to see which one has more quality than the others. There are tools to do it. So there are like rating tools, and are coming more and more. You have to think that there is a very nascent business, no? I mean, there are 2 companies making ratings around, and they are still like getting there, no? Maybe only 10% of the projects are rated. This is a process where there is a certification company, there is a company that says which is good or which is not good, but they certified that. So in the initial point, when you buy a project, if it's certified, you know that the project is good. Then you have to look at which is better, a solar plant in China or a solar plant in Germany, depending on the materials that they have, depending on the EPC contractor, depends on many things. You have to take consideration of all those things. Same thing for forestry. Are you conserving a forestry that needs to be conservated, or a forestry that really is like in a process that can be deforested in the Amazonia because they are changing for soya agriculture process or something like that, no? So basically what we do is we have a pretty strong team in supply that analyzes all the projects that we upload to our marketplace. We are integrating now new technologies again, AI and other things to work on that. And we, with our API, we plug in as well with other companies that are already doing that, right? So it has to be a multiple areas, multiple touch points, right? It's not just, okay, it's validated by the certification company, I trust it, I put it, because we saw that there are some mistakes in the market because it's still too early, right? I mean, sometimes I hear people criticizing carbon markets. This is not right, but we don't criticize oil and gas. We criticize sometimes more things that are trying to save the planet because they make some mistakes. Now, we need to solve the mistakes, but it's a matter of time, right? So we need to keep going, keep improving, get more companies that do this, and apply, obviously, at least some guidelines that would be the ones that I'm elaborating, no? Like, for example, that crediting companies or that scoring companies, and at the same time you have to do that job every day with your own team in order to know, hey, I'm uploading one project that is not of that high quality. So that's how we do it today.
And in that way, David, why you started this project? Because I think the data is very important nowadays, but what about a few years ago?
Yeah. That's a good question, actually. Let me go a bit back, with my background, just for you, so you'll know. I co-founded Redpoints in 2012, right? So after Redpoints, I love the legal basis regulations, even though I'm not a lawyer, right? But that's actually the beauty, no? When you are not a guy in that, you can see, I would say, the opportunities. So regulatory, everything related legal, it's quite all traditional, right? So I found out that technology can help you a lot on the efficiency, scaling processes, automating, right? So in Redpoints, that probably some of you know, Redpoints is anti-counterfeiting, anti-privacy platform. So we basically detected, removed, and reported. And nowadays, Redpoints works with clients as Disney, like Louis Vuitton, Nike, Puma, right? So it was quite successful. And 3 years ago, I felt like I was in New York. I wanted to do other things. I'm from Girona, right? So if any of you wants to visit Girona, you'll love it. And I really wanted to go back to my homeland. And I found out that counterfeit, piracy, it was a very limited market. Privacy, data, it's everywhere, right? So it wasn't as hot as right now, I would say. I think that right now, environment, all the social part, especially compliance, governance is quite trendy. But in 2018, it came GDPR. GDPR is like the regulation, and everybody else takes GDPR as the framework, right? So GDPR started, then in the USA, CCPA, Brazil, every single country, which basically it's a framework that regulates how companies should treat, should collect, should process personal data. It's kind of basic, but every country can then modify a bit. So I found out that, again, who was the main and traditional player? It was lawyers. So you imagine any of your companies, if it's a big company, I would say not even a big company, 50 employees, you have several departments, right? And you as a CEO cannot be concerned on how this data is treated. And most of those companies, what they were doing is, I'll go to Garrigues, I'll go to the lawyers, I'll ask for a GDPR compliance program. Okay, what's the problem here? You are paying lawyers, means, sorry, there is lawyers here, I always go back with the lawyers, but normally the hour is pretty expensive, right? So the question is, you as a company, as a technology, most of our companies are technology or big companies, you are paying someone who's supposed to know how your company is doing, processing, scaling, transferring data, who has access to that data, what kind of data, but more important, not today. The next month, the month after, privacy by design if you are developing product and so on. No? So any human being can do that. So only technology connecting to your infrastructure, your corporate apps, wherever the through of data, the source of data, it goes. And that's why we kind of are trying or are creating the category of constant compliance. And constant compliance is no more than you as a company growing, going to different countries, launching new products, hiring new people, should constantly be able to demonstrate that you are doing the right regulation, that you are applying the right processes, the right security measures. That's why we found out that applying technology, connectors, going with the quick value proposition, and more important, as I said, with the constant compliance, with the constant monitoring, with the discovery promise, it's completely different and it's quite game changer, right? So here we are, challenging.
That's great. And it's great because it's just to get closer to Telefónica, in the case of Wayra, these solutions to help us not only to work with your solutions, is also learn from your solutions, which from Telefónica, which is huge. We always say is that we are kind of a startup in that huge company, so it makes us learn from you. So I think we don't have enough time, but I would like to go ahead with this last question. Now we have a situation in the market. It's a bit more difficult. Sometimes, some years ago it was, but nowadays it's not too easy to raise capital. What about the speech of the I am an impact startup to raise capital? It helps you. What happens now with that raising round?
Well, in my case, the impact is the return, to be honest, right? So privacy and all that stuff, I think the governance, it's still fine, but we are not as hot as I would say, the environment, education. So to be frankly honest with you, our hottest trend is that we are growing very well, we are efficient, companies need us, we are a must-have, not a nice-to-have, let's say, need, right, in this case. And we are not really using the governance need. For me, as I said, the impact of companies needing us, not just because they have to become compliant, they are afraid because of the fines, as well as a business consideration. If they don't have us, they might not get the right revenue. This is itself a really strong, I would say argument to raise money, and yeah, that's what we are exploring most of it.
This morning, I was talking with one of our investors. They came to visit yesterday from Japan, Ombron Ventures. So we took them to have lunch. They enjoyed a good paella with us. They loved it. And good wine as well with them. So they said, Fran, you know why we are here? Our founder in 1970, he prognosticated what was going to happen in the next four changes of society. We are in the one that he prognosticated that was going to happen, where people start to take care more about themselves, health, about their planet. You know how climate is in the DNA of every young people, which is good for us as well. And they said, and you are the company that aggregates all that in climate, because we need to help the planet to help ourselves, right? So today we are in a process of that. And the companies know that in the next 3 decades, the best investment you can find is climate tech. And you have to support those companies. The problem is that, you know, whenever someone gets in a bad environment, everyone gets scared, no? The money is scary, right? I've been a banker for 15 years, no? But today it's true that impact and climate tech, it is probably the best market where to invest, right? And if you make a bet today, it's going to be the best investment in the next 3 decades. So I don't say that. It's Larry Flynn like BlackRock who says that. So yeah, I think that we are in a better situation than other type of startups. But still, there is a lot of people that don't understand climate profoundly, right? There are some specialized funds. Impact funds were very tiny until today, but big funds are coming. The other day, one 3.5 billion fund was created by the CEO, is the founder of the former CEO of BP, former CEO of IHS Markit, which is one of the top rating companies worldwide for financials. And this is coming more and more and more. So we will see it in the next years, growing and growing and growing, you know.
Sounds good. And the education is the future, so...
Absolutely, I fully agree with Fran that we are noticing that the number of impact funds is growing, constantly growing. But as of today, it's true that not many funds do really factor the impact side of a business. It's a nice to have, but not a must. So, and in our case, we do really measure the impact that we generate because it's pretty simple. We analyze if the employability of the student before the course, so he's unemployed, of the nature of the jobs he had before the course, if it's a part-time job, the rotation, and we really compare that situation to the one after the course. So we do really see how our ISA has really changed the jobs that the students get access to after the bootcamp, and it's something that the investment funds are really interested in, and hopefully in the near future, more and more investors will factor.
And we from Wayra, from Telefónica, we will continue supporting and investing in impact companies to help Telefónica grow and be on the spot of the sustainability and impact in the world. So I think now, thank you so much for explaining us what is ESG, what you're working on to help that world that sometimes we don't really know what means, to deep dive in that word. Thank you so much, David, Javi, Fran.
Thank you,
it was a pleasure.
Likewise.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.